if you are a writer, you can take a look at Compassionate Writer and really feel you can approach your own writing with a lot more compassion. You may be an amazing writer already, but I suspect if you're a writer, you're pretty hard on yourself. There's a writing process that you need to kind of honor. You need to honor yourself, and you need to, as a writer, understand that writing is hard and not to quit. And you need to feel empowered and encouraged. And some of the people who have reviewed my book said that reading is like having a nice pat on the shoulder, or, someone sort of encouraging you. That's the goal, is to kind of encourage you as a writer. So that is my hope, is that you pick that up as a writer and you find your, inspiration and encouragement, and that you feel even more focused on yourself and being able to do this writing that you need to do. As a reader, my belief is that everybody has a story. So you can pick up the Compassionate Writer if you're interested. It will tell you a lot about writing, which I think is super helpful. And I believe writing helps us make sense of the world. It will also, though, help you just view your life differently. So there's lots of exercises in there about, looking at different life events from different lenses to kind of help you both understand them and have compassion for yourself and others. And I think that's really effective. And I think you would find that is a hugely impactful thing to do. And that a lot of people have told me that when they have viewed their lives with more compassion, viewed the people in them, viewed themselves, that they feel a lot better.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. It's the Author Podcast. We get to meet amazing people from around the world, authors and writers. And when you have an author on the screen who's been writing for a long time and has many, many books for you, and then they send you a copy of their latest book, and I'm holding it right now, The Compassionate Writer. It's amazing. I got my little notes in here as well. Anne is here. Excited to have her on the show. If you're looking to find your voice and enhance your story and touch lives, there, I read that right from the cover. It's The Compassionate Writer, Dan. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
How's that for product placement, right? It's right
Fabulous.
there. It's right there. Good. Yeah, I'm doing a good job. Good.
Love it. Yeah. You're
Good.
hired.
All right. I'm in. Woo! It's great to have you on the show, Anne. I've been reading through the book, and thank you for sending me a copy. It's there's a lot of great parallels for anybody in a creative space or somebody who wants to be in a creative space, and maybe they're wrestling with their journey and trying to get to where you are. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but let's start with where I like to start with everybody. Where are you, Anne, in this great big world of ours?
I am in Evanston, Illinois, just outside Chicago.
All right. Been there a long time then?
I've been in Evanston about 5 years, and I've been in the Chicago area since 1998. So
Good.
About 28 years now. Hard to imagine.
Okay. What's a place or a thing to see or do where you live that somebody shows up at your door and says, "What should I do here?"
Yeah,
do you
other
send
than
them anywhere?
Visit me, of course.
Of course, but that's the first thing. And buy your books. That's the first.
Well, I think there are two things to see here. One is Northwestern University, which is a beautiful old school from, I think it was established in the 1860s. And
Wow.
that has beautiful buildings throughout, but also Lou Malnati's Pizza. If you like deep dish pizza, we got that for you right here in Evanston.
Hashtag sponsored right there. That's good. I like that.
Not
There you go.
sponsored.
Not
just
sponsored.
a fan.
Okay. All right. There you go. Well, everyone put that on your list, those two places. Well, three. You got to definitely go and see Anne and buy all of her books too. She'll have them on the kitchen table for you. You can just shop and buy. There's a lot of great books to buy, right? I love it. Tell us a little bit about your background too, Anne. I was listening to you and on different podcasts and television. It looked like a bunch of different places you've been as a guest, and people have been kind of highlighting some of your background in your career. Can you kind of bring us up to speed a little bit about your background as well?
Sure. I studied psychology as an undergraduate student and ended up getting a PhD in psychology, but not the type of psychology where you can do therapy. I did more research psychology and ended up in the business world and spent a lot of time helping companies understand humans and helping them, design better products for people and, communications that were effective and things like that. And I owned my own business for 21 years. I had started a market research company about several years after I had graduated with my PhD and had worked for some consulting firms and started my own business that I had for 21 years. Along the way, I ended up writing a few books. one of them was quite instrumental for my business, and that was a wonderful book that ended up actually saving my business. But along the way, also was doing a lot of other books on animals and meditation and different things like that because I just love to write. And then I sold my business in 24, and I now write full time. And I also run a literary journal that is one of the top 20 literary magazines. It's called Chicago Story Press Literary Journal. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Very interesting. Your love of animals, where does this originate from?
Because I've always had pets, and I got really interested in how along the way I had some cats that seemed like they understood me in a way that other human beings didn't. And I thought there's something really interesting here, something very intelligent. So I ended up writing a book about all the different animal species, and it's called Heartfelt Connections. And it was about the kind of bonds we can form with, could be horses or even goats or llamas or pigs or cats or dogs, and ended up traveling all around the country and meeting people and talking to them about what was the connection with this animal. And I met service animals I met llama service animals, if you can imagine, that were amazingly connected to the elderly, the people in an assisted living facility. And this llama understood these people in some ways better than some of the nursing staff and was able to do things for them. And that astounded me. I saw that same llama interact with developmentally disabled children who often had difficulties with speech. And yet this llama connected with these children, and these kids felt like they could communicate with this llama. And I started realizing, wow, there's a lot here. And so I ended up, like I said, traveling all over the country and, went to Dallas and met a pig that understood English words and could find them on a soundboard. I mean, I started thinking, well, there's a lot to animal intelligence that we just don't understand.
Yeah, I watched, speaking of that, I had a video clip pop up on TikTok. I mean, always pops up videos. But this was a police officer with his canine unit, his dog. And there was a little boy, autistic boy, with his parents, came up to the dog. And the dog knew, the dog was specifically trained for this, laid down, like in a very submissive way. And the boy could do whatever he wanted to the dog. And the dog was trained like that. And I'm like, this is a powerful dog that's used to be threatening, intimidating. But in that moment with that boy, nope. Completely surrendered, right? And I'm like, wow, the beauty of that, right?
These animals are extremely intelligent in ways that we don't quite understand.
I don't think we give them enough credit, right? Even your simple, like we have a house cat here, Penny is her name. We adopted her, and she just knows. She just knows when to be around, and she knows when to be alone. But when she's there, she's there, and it's amazing the bond you have with these animals. So
I had a cat who, in the middle of a fight with one of my previous partners, we're in the middle of a fight, and the cat came out in the middle of the screaming match, which cats normally don't do, as you know. Came out, jumped onto the couch, and jumped up and started rubbing her face against my cheek to comfort me. Right? And that's pretty unusual. And the same cat, when we had a house guest for the weekend, the house guest was saying terrible things. Oh, your cats. Don't you think you should bathe your cat? Don't you think your cat should lose weight? And I hate cats. And he kept saying all these things when she was in the room. At the end of the weekend, he couldn't find his underwear. And where was the underwear? Someone had put the underwear underneath the primary bed in the primary bedroom, covered in dust bunnies. It wasn't a human being who did that. She was irritated.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So, yeah, there's multiple. Again, everyone, you got to go to the website. We'll have a link for everybody to go and check it out. But Anne has got amazing books. And what I love, Anne, when I'm scrolling through this, as a first-timer on your website, I'm like, I don't see a connection between all these books. Usually there's like a thread, right? Yeah. And I'm like, well, I can tell that you're writing what you love. And I think that's one of the key things I think a lot of authors need to lean into. Writing what you know is great, but writing what you love gives you some flexibility to go in any direction you want. You don't feel kind of like penned in to one certain type of writing. Do whatever you want. Write what you love in the moment, right?
Yeah, I once had a reader look at all of the books that were on a banner, and I was at an author fair, and he said, I don't see the connection here. I mean, I know there is one, but I just don't see it. And that's exactly what it is. And I do write what I love. And people say, you should really specialize and you should only do books on cats or you should only do books on meditation. I'm like, nope, That's not who I am.
Well, the common thread is Anne. There's your common thread. That's the thread. I wrote them all. So there you go. I like that. So compassionate writer, this, as a podcaster, I was mentioning to you before we started that there's a lot of parallels in my world. I help people start podcasts. I help them find their motivation, find their voice, learn how to craft a story, how to communicate. And when I was reading through this, I'm trying to stay focused on the author audience that you're writing to specifically, but there's a lot of parallels in this book that could help a lot of people. I think this would be great for any creative person who's on a journey to, again, to start something new or continue doing what they're doing, but find their purpose in what they're doing as well. Am I close?
You
as
are.
as a reader?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have always believed that everyone has a story. Every single person who's walking on this planet has a story, and it's worth hearing. And I really believe strongly in helping people find those stories and find meaning in their lives and the events of their life. And so, yes, I absolutely believe that there's a parallel for any creative person who's really trying to express something about their life.
So what was the starting point for the compassionate writer? How did the initial idea and the spark come to write this book?
So a few things kind of happened together. One was that I actually started to feel like I needed to be more compassionate in my life and more compassionate towards myself and more compassionate towards some of my memories and people in my past. I felt that would be something that would be important for me. I also felt that a lot of times in my writing, that a lot of the really great writing that I was either reading or in some cases trying to create, that it was really improved or it was good because it had some level of understanding of the people that were in that particular piece of writing. And so when I realized that good writing often was compassionate and that, in life we should really be more compassionate, it kind of went sort of, oh, I really should put these things together. And then after I had that idea, honestly, I couldn't walk away from it. I would wake up in the middle of the night and say, you have to write this book. You have to write this book. You have to do this. And so finally I just said, okay, whatever is going on here, I need to do it. So I just sat down and literally just wrote it. And it kind of just flowed out of me. I feel like sometimes I feel like it was sort of, inspired from the ether,
Taps you on the shoulder, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. But I really believe that the really great writers look at people and they don't see in their writing a villain and a victor, typically. What they see is flawed individuals. And our heroes and our heroines are flawed. And really good writers show how heroes and heroines are flawed. But so are villains. They're obviously flawed, but there's something about them that makes them human. And when we understand the gray, right, rather than sort of the strong sort of black and white, the deep colors, the opposites, when we really understand a lot of the gray material of life, then I think we can both look at our own lives and say, yeah, I made a mistake in the past, but let me think about all the reasons why that might have happened. And not that it excuses a mistake or makes it all right, but that you can kind of see that and say, that makes me understand life a little bit better because I can go back and kind of think about that. And so if I write fiction or I write nonfiction, I'm really trying to understand the people within it and show kind of what led to what and why people are the way they are. And it's never straightforward. And when you have compassion for people, you see the nuances of life.
I did an episode recently on my podcast about the difference between empathy and compassion. And I talked about how empathy is the ability to identify with somebody else and what they're feeling, what's going on in their world. It's more of on a feeling based, but a compassionate response is an action step where you actually now work towards a solution for that person you're having empathy for, right? You've gone beyond feeling, you've gone now to action. There's something put in place.
You're trying to understand them. You don't just feel sorry for them. You're trying to understand them. And understanding people is hard. So
if this book was the empathetic writer, it would be more based on identifying maybe with somebody's feelings or how they show up in the world or experiencing it that way. Would that be it?
Yeah, I see those as somewhat synonymous and somewhat not, like you pointed out. I think that when we have compassion for people, sometimes that engenders empathy, you know. And that sometimes when you have empathy, then you start to, become compassionate. So, they're connected, I feel.
Yeah. They're cousins. Yeah.
And I feel like, empathy is like, I can feel what you're feeling, or I can put myself in your situation. I empathize, right? And I would say, that's something that can happen and may not happen. I may not be able to forgive my parents or my sister or my, that terrible person who did this, right? I may not be able to forgive them, but I kind of understand it.
Yeah.
I may not empathize, but maybe I have a level of understanding that maybe leads to empathy. I don't know,
The example I gave was you're at the grocery store, you're standing behind somebody and their debit card, their swipe card doesn't work, credit card doesn't work. And in that moment, your empathetic side would be like, oh, that's happened to me before.
Oh, yeah.
So my card was, right.
I feel what that feels like. Yeah.
Right? The compassionate side would be, here, let me pay for your groceries.
Correct. That's right.
Because now this is embarrassing. I don't know what's wrong, but let me step in and help you.
Right.
That difference then, right? It's kind of like, I've gone beyond, oh, that's happened to me before, to here, let me try to help.
Yeah, empathy, the feeling, and compassion, as you say, is more of an active thing. And we can look at that person and say, so why did that happen? And why does that keep happening to you, right? Okay,
so in the title of your book then, The Compassionate Writer, can we just dig a little deeper on the word and why it's titled that and why compassion is such an important part of our writing process?
Yeah, I think that, compassion is a level of understanding, and it's also putting that into practice. It's that action that we spoke about. When we put things on a page, we are actively understanding them, actively communicating about them. And so the idea is to engender compassion in our readers. That's really the idea, is that when we write, nuanced characters, when we look back on our own lives with some compassion, when we look back on other people in our past and we look at them with compassion, we start to portray them in ways that actually help other people understand us, help other people understand our characters, whether they be fictional or non-fictional. And by doing that, we help them understand themselves. They see themselves on our page. They say, oh, I've done that. I've made that mistake. Or, I almost made that mistake. Yeah. Or, my mother made that mistake. Now, I kind of understand that a little bit more. And that's really what we're doing, is we're trying to engender a level of understanding of ourselves and other people, because when we do that, we help other people. And when I say touch lives, I really mean that, because I can tell you, people send me notes, for some of my writing that's more compassionate, and say, I really appreciate you describing this situation with your mother. I really appreciate you describing this difficult situation with your children. It helped me so much. And I'm less critical of myself, or maybe I'm more understanding of why that happened now that I read your piece.
The finish line for the compassionate writer, by the end of this book, as a reader, I want you, as the author, to arrive at this point. Do you have a finish line for the reader that you're hoping they reach by the time they're done reading the book?
Well, I have many. I suppose I want, if they're an author, I want them to feel that A, they have a story to tell, that B, they're motivated to tell it, and that C, they're motivated to do it in a way that, helps them understand the situation, the people, That's what I really want. I want people to feel empowered, and I want them to feel kindly toward themselves and to believe that they can do it and that it's important. And it is. It really is. Every single person has a story. Every single one. And I interview people who aren't writers, and they tell me their stories, and it's so powerful. So those are probably the things that I want them to take away. If someone isn't thinking, I want to write a book, I don't want to write a book about my life, but I want them to, if they journal every day and write in a journal about their life, I'd like them to take a different approach. I'd like them to see that their writing is important, that it helps them make sense of the world. And if they can do that with some level of compassion, I strongly believe that will change their lives.
The one thing I was reading about here in the book, and it's more near the end here, but you talk a little bit about rejection and why it feels so personal. And I'm putting you on the spot, but I have the book, so I can read from it here to help you out here. Because you're like, oh, gee, yeah. So the one thing you talk about was what rejection actually means and what rejection doesn't mean. So I kind of like to talk about a couple of these things, like what rejection actually means. Mm-hmm. And you talk about that maybe in this situation when you're feeling rejection, wherever, as an author, whatever you're working on, that it wasn't the right fit in the moment. Like, there's nothing wrong with the work, but it might be it might be on the desk of the wrong type of editor, might be on the desk of the wrong type of publisher for what you're doing. You wrote a sci-fi and they do business books. You could just be on the wrong desk, right? Nothing wrong with what you did.
Right.
You just might be the wrong fit at the moment.
Right.
So can you expand a little bit on fit as far as how when people are dealing with that rejection?
Yeah, and as a founder and editor of the Chicago Story Press Literary Journal, this is an issue that I deal with a lot. So, for example, I will get, in the middle of July, I'll get stories about Santa Claus. I'm not going to publish a story about Santa Claus in the middle of July. Yeah. And I'm probably not going to hold that piece until December. Yeah. So typically it's like, I really can't work with it. It might be a great story, but I can't, it's just not a right fit, right?
Yeah.
And then people sometimes send cute stories and they're funny, and I could see that they'd be great for, a party to tell a story, but they don't really say very much that's meaningful about life. And we're really focused on stories that give us some insight about life, some insight about people or about life. There's something that we learn from that story. You got into a brawl with your friend, and then it's like, okay, ha ha ha, but all right, but it's not interesting, And so that's a fit issue. But I know other journals, they love that stuff, right? Yeah. And then, it's interesting in the literary magazine world, the one topic that we get the most submissions on across the board is the death of a parent. People write about the death of a parent. That's typically the thing that people are most upset about. It's most kind of, world-rocking situation. It really affects a person when they lose a parent at whatever age. And yet, I've seen literary journals that say, please don't submit any story about your parent dying. Because basically, we've all published so many of those, right?
Yeah, right.
So, again, these are things that, it could be the best story ever, but it's just, it doesn't quite work. So that's also, it's the case that it's kind of a numbers game. I mean, the reality is that I get a ton of rejections myself. I get some acceptances and they're wonderful, but I get more rejections than acceptances, which is the case for every single writer. And, sometimes it's like, well, this journal gets thousands of submissions every month, and it goes to a fairly junior person to determine if it even gets to an editor. And so, it didn't quite hit that particular reader in the right way. And they're also dealing with, 300 of them. So
it comes down, part of this comes down to audience, right? Is there an audience for this story as well?
Correct.
I watched, again, TikTok showed me this video clip, a farmer feeding his cows hay, and he had a hay bale.
Yeah.
And while he's talking, he sliced the hay bale and threw it towards the cows in a perfect one-shot move, and all the hay was lined up in front of all these cows. And he's been doing this for 40, 50 years, cutting these bales and throwing them this way. He got 1 million views on TikTok.
I know. And,
right?
who would think that would be something you'd want to watch? But now you say this to me, I'm like, I'm going to find that Hail Bay video,
right? Because he came on the next video, his next post. He's like, I don't know why you guys like this. He's like, I'll show you what I do and how I do it, but this is like what I do every day. He's like, I don't understand why you want to see this, right? But there's an audience for it.
Interesting.
Right?
That's
if
fabulous.
he came to you and said, hey, Anne, I want to write a book about how to slice hay bales for cows.
Yeah, I'd say,
you'd be
you know
like,
what? Maybe not. Yeah.
Right? Is there an audience for
Possibly
that?
not. And then he said to me, and that's the other thing, too, is that sometimes stuff gets rejected. That's great because, people don't think there's an audience, and there is. So, go figure.
It's amazing.
I had some people tell me, oh, I don't know about that book, Compassionate Writer. I don't really know if there's an audience. There clearly is,
Well, we're talking about it right now. So yes, there is.
It's number 12 in bestsellers this week.
I love it. So. Okay, so we talked about what rejection actually means, but what rejection doesn't mean, and you have 3 here. I'll just read them quick. That your work isn't valuable, that your work will never be published, and that you should stop writing. Those are like, oh my gosh, those are like 3 key points, I think, where people get that first rejection notice from anybody, and then they're just like, okay, I'm done. I'm out. Yeah. Apparently, it was a bad idea. I had a bad idea, and I just got proof that my idea was terrible. So I'm not going to do it.
And we have many examples of very famous authors who were rejected over and over and over and over again. I mean, I could name, pretty much every famous author Stephen King being one of them, who had, his entire wall was, the wallpaper was basically all the rejections he received, and we all know the Harry Potter story and everything else. So, I mean, we all know that it's a crapshoot in some ways, and this is how it goes. And I also know that for myself, if I get a piece rejected over and over and over and over again, sometimes I need to put it in a drawer, and then I need to pull it back out and say, is there anything I might change about this and make it stronger?
Yeah.
And then I keep at it. I keep putting it out there, and eventually it usually flies. So you got to be persistent.
What are some more of the core components of the compassionate writer that we need to touch on to kind of introduce it to a reader, to kind of get them into this book? Because I think there's such great value here for a writer. What else do we want to touch on?
Well, I think that, one of the things that I talk about is, that everyone has a story. I just don't know that everyone necessarily thinks they have a story. And I believe that part of, the compassionate writer, what it does very effectively is that I talk about, look, you have a lot of life events and there's meaning in those life events. And how do you find what that meaning is? So if you can look back on your life and look at some of the points of vulnerability, look at some of the big things of your life, and then if you can go beyond that to really interpret and kind of show us what that meant to you, that suddenly becomes really valuable and something that other people want to understand, So if you had a weird experience at your wedding, and it kind of told you something important about your partner, or told you something really important about your family, or told you something really interesting about marriage, or if you, had made some decisions along the way that you regret when you were a parent, or, in whatever capacity you are as a teacher or in your career or whatever, like there's lots, I think, that we can mine for our life in terms of our stories. And there's a lot that can be valuable once we start to look deeper into it. And so one of the things I talk about is, how do you find meaning? What's the meaning behind that event? And usually it's really around sort of, what did I learn? And when you start to think about your life stories and what you learned from those various life stories, then you have something that a lot of people want to read.
Well, one of my other podcasts, I have multiple. It's called Dad Space. And I created that podcast because I'm an empty nest dad. I have 3 grown children. And I wanted to reflect on my dad story and how I got here and help a younger dad who's just starting out. And just be a community member for them, right? I wanted that to be a support because I didn't have that. There's no such thing as podcasting when I was a dad for the first time. But I'm like, along with your book, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to connect this idea, this concept of a dad podcast to an audience. It's one thing just to get on and just talk about dad things, but I want it to resonate, and I want audience members to go, yeah, this is the podcast for me. This is the book for me. This is the whatever for me, right? So my focus is when one of my children were born, we were all in the delivery room, and the doctor looked at me in the chaos of the busyness of what's happening, and just looked at me for a second, eyeball to eyeball, and said, "We're here for your wife, and in this moment, if you pass out or whatever, or there's nobody to catch you, there's nobody here for you." And those words, "there's nobody here for you," as a father to be in this moment of overwhelm and feeling like I'm in the way and all this, right? The next day, while I'm holding my newborn, all I could hear was the doctor's voice. "There's nobody here for you."
Yeah.
And I felt so inadequate. And I didn't have anybody to talk to about that. And I'm like, there's the premise of my podcast. Right? That's it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example of that's a life event, a very emotional life event, and something that really hit you, and personally, and something that kind of has reverberated with you. But I think there's, when you think about that event, and if I was telling you, what to do as a writer, I'd say, let's start out with that event right there, and now let's go deeper. In what ways does society tell you we're not here for you? Do we not celebrate Father's Day the same as we celebrate Mother's Day? We don't. Yeah, do we give men the kind of support, that they need as fathers? No, And so I think, to have a podcast where you're helping other fathers because you're really transmitting your learnings to them. Because I think that's really the issue, is that specific event has deep meaning because it says so much. It says so much about what our society feels. It says a lot about how the medical community, is, but it also says a lot about what those deep-seated needs are for fathers and how society doesn't deal with it. And I think that's a great podcast because I think men really need that. They need help and they need those learnings, you know?
So as if an author came to you with just the seed of an idea, but not a defined audience, is that a good place to start? Do I need to do more work on the audience side? What would you say to an author or writer in that case?
Well, as you know, I write what I love. And so I don't think about the audience.
Yeah.
Well, because I write what I love, it seems like it resonates. So I would say come with a seed of an idea and start thinking about what is the idea and why is it meaningful to you? And, I think about it like, what did you take from it? What's the really important stuff in that situation? And why is it meaningful? And I mean, I think, as I said to you, you're talking about the dad podcast, and I sort of took that and ran with it probably, and you had been thinking, I'm sure, all the same things about, sort of what do dads need. But I think that, the reality is that once you identify something that's highly emotional and that really sticks with you, typically it's indicative of something really important for other people as well.
And that emotional side is really important. You bring that on your book. I'm looking right now actually at chapter 8, Emotional Journeys and How to Craft Stories That Touch the Heart. And you talk about why readers crave emotional journeys. Can we, without giving away the book, because we're supposed to buy the book, because that's the idea, why do readers, listeners to audiobooks, listeners to stories, why do they crave that emotional connection with the storyteller?
Yeah, that's, by the way, my favorite chapter. So I'm glad
I got extra bonus point for that.
Yeah.
Good, yeah, all right, good. I love it, yeah.
I'm glad you liked it. So I think the fact is that we're emotional creatures. And at the end of the day, people, and I studied emotions when I was at Yale as a graduate student. And I remember one of the professors who went on to become very famous, and he eventually was the president of Yale, said to me, people go to the movies to feel stuff. I mean, why would you go to the movies to go to see a horror, flick? Why would you go to see, somebody dying on screen? Why would you go to see, because we want to feel things. We want to feel sad. We want to feel scared. We want to feel, excited. We want to feel stuff. We're emotional creatures. And the reality is that you actually recall the events in your life that are emotional in nature, because we know that when you have an emotion, it actually connects with memory in a way that non-emotional memories don't. So it's a marker to remember things. And so when we create an emotional journey, we both make the reader feel things, which are important, but we also create sort of more meaningful interactions on the page that are more memorable. And so when we do that, we're both speaking to something that we want to do, we want to feel, but we're also making it something that people can relate to, because the things that matter the most to us really are the things that are emotional in nature. It's our relationship, it's our mistakes, it's the times we were angry, sad. Those are the things that we think about, we think of our memories. And that's also the stuff we want to understand. We want to figure out, how to behave. We want to figure out the lessons. And that's why we listen to stories, because we want to see, how did that guy deal with it? How did that woman do it? When we see people living their lives, and even if we wouldn't rob a bank, we kind of want to know, well, how did that person get to that point, and then what happened?
Yeah. That explains the fascination with true crime podcast. We do not want anyone to duplicate any of these stories in true crime, but people like to listen to that and follow the journey.
Absolutely.
The videos that catch me, again, I keep going to videos. The videos that keep catching me are the son or daughter that return home and the parent doesn't know they're there, and they're just standing in the room, and they turn around and they're like, oh my gosh, or someone coming back from serving their country. Any of these types of ones, you're just like, or two best friends who haven't seen each other for years, and they fly them in for a birthday party, and you see them just that moment of reaction. In that moment, you start feeling something inside of you. Like something wells up, and you're just like, right? You just feel like you're there. And then you put yourself into your own context. You think about your own children, your own relationships. And how would I react if that happened to me? That feels like what you're trying to tell us through your book. And you do it so well that if we can tap into that response, right, from a reader to what we're writing, where they put themselves into their own situation and mimic and model what you're talking about, but in their context, right?
Right.
I think that's a great connection.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad you think so. Yeah, the emotional journey is not so easy to craft. It really involves kind of thinking this through and being, really kind of taking people on a journey, because that's what it is. It is a journey, but doing it effectively. And I think we are, as human beings, we're kind of made this way. We're made to actually understand this. But when you bring people along for that, yeah, you can have this enormous emotional reaction on the page. And you're right. Those are the things that when we see, whether it's a video or whether it's something that we read, but when we see somebody go through that experience, it really pulls so much stuff up in us. Because at the end of the day, we're emotional creatures. We are. I mean, it's a huge part of our brain. It is how we are wired. That's how it is.
It's exciting. Okay, so beyond and including compassion, which is the key part of what we're talking about, what other components would you say to a new author, a new writer, that they should consider in storytelling? My example kind of is in my mind, and why I'm asking the question is, you can have a conversation with somebody. Like I could create a podcast, for example, in my world, and have two people come on and talk about something, and they can have a great conversation. We can put it out there. There's a podcast. But as a listener, you're like, it just feels like you recorded a conversation on the phone, and there's no connection to me as an audience member who wasn't there. I don't understand the story and all that. I want to be, as a listener, as a reader, I want to be connected to the content. So from your perspective, then what else? Yeah, what do we need in our stories?
So what we need to have compassion for our readers. And that's a key part of what we're doing here, is by understanding our characters. What's really important is that we have to have compassion for our readers. And that's something that you kind of definitely pointed out, which is that you can relate a story, but unless you're sort of making an effort to bring your reader into it, it's not going to be effective. So, when I talk about crafting an emotional journey, I talk about writing in ways that are simple to understand and that bring your reader along. I talk about, really understanding your characters in a way that the readers can see themselves on the page. So by understanding, and I get a lot of submissions, for example, I'm amazed at people who send something to me and I'm like, wait, what are we talking about? Who's this? What happened? All of it's sort of like the writer expected that the reader was in their head or something.
Yeah, right.
And so we have to assume that the reader really wants to be brought into the story, explain the context, explain the people, explain what's happening, show us what's at stake. What do people care about? What do they want? Now, when I create full, rich characters that feel real, and that's whether I'm writing memoir or whether I'm writing fiction, I need to explain, if I'm writing about my own life, what do I care about as Anne Beall? What do I want? What's my history? What's my context? What are the things that matter to me? And then I can bring you on the emotional journey of something significant for me, whether it's learning a terrible lesson, whether it's overcoming something very difficult or, dealing with a huge loss in my life. But once you feel that you know me, when I take you then on that journey, you're invested. And then you want to see sort of, how do I deal with that? So I write a lot about being a step parent. That's something that's people don't really write about a lot, is being a step parent. It's kind of it's a really sort of second class parental designation. And I write about sort of, what is it like to be overlooked? What is it like to be told, well, you're not really a parent, you're a step parent. That's not the same. What is it like to love a child as much as if you had that child biologically and be told that your relationship doesn't matter? But I have to bring you along that journey, right? I have to tell you where I came from. Why did I become a step parent? How did that happen? How did I approach being a step parent? Then you can understand some of my, what happens to me as a step parent, and you can understand how painful it is. But I can't just throw you into that. You won't get it, right?
Going back to my dad podcast, that's a conversation we've had on the show before, and I think you're right. It's not represented extensively for parents, right? And I think that biological parents don't know how to address it with step-parents. Step-parents don't know how to address it as well. Then there's a big gap there. So I'm glad that that's where you're heading. I like that. Interesting. Okay, so Anne Beall is the website, annebeall.com. We'll have a link for everything in the show notes. I want to explain to two different people how your website is going to help them. And so for the authors and writers, when they come to your website, and for the readers, when they come to your website. Two different people, two different intents. But let's talk about your website, and from that lens, for those two people, what can we see when we show up on your website?
So you can see the books that I've written, and you can also see the essays that I published in literary journals. And you can see how I approach my own writing. And if you are a writer, you can take a look at Compassionate Writer and really feel you can approach your own writing with a lot more compassion. You may be an amazing writer already, but I suspect if you're a writer, you're pretty hard on yourself. There's a writing process that you need to kind of honor. You need to honor yourself, and you need to, as a writer, understand that writing is hard and not to quit. And you need to feel empowered and encouraged. And some of the people who have reviewed my book said that reading is like having a nice pat on the shoulder, or, someone sort of encouraging you. That's the goal, is to kind of encourage you as a writer. So that is my hope, is that you pick that up as a writer and you find your, inspiration and encouragement, and that you feel even more focused on yourself and being able to do this writing that you need to do. As a reader, my belief is that everybody has a story. So you can pick up the Compassionate Writer if you're interested. It will tell you a lot about writing, which I think is super helpful. And I believe writing helps us make sense of the world. It will also, though, help you just view your life differently. So there's lots of exercises in there about, looking at different life events from different lenses to kind of help you both understand them and have compassion for yourself and others. And I think that's really effective. And I think you would find that is a hugely impactful thing to do. And that a lot of people have told me that when they have viewed their lives with more compassion, viewed the people in them, viewed themselves, that they feel a lot better. You can also, though, appreciate all the stories about, animals and all the different things I've done. I actually have books on meditation, embracing calm, meditation journeys for inner peace, or embracing self-compassion, meditation journeys for self-kindness. These are actually stories where you are the protagonist in the actual story, and you go on different journeys, and maybe you go to an ice castle, or maybe you go to a spa or whatever, but you have different things that you do that help you either become more peaceful or more self-compassionate. So there's lots and lots of stuff on the website if you're interested.
And thank you so much for this. Thank you for taking time to be with us on the show, and for the Compassionate Writer, which I have in my hand, and I'm loving it. There's, again, a wide audience for this. And as an author and as a writer, this would be one of the books I would have right next to my journal, my writing space. I would have this in my space as a constant companion as I go through my journey as a writer.
That.
Yeah, it's excellent. It's got so much stuff, very practical as well. And there's lots of good things around prompts and motivation and encouragement and support. It's like having Anne right there in the room with you as you do your writing journey. So, Anne, it's great. I love it.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so pleased that you like it. That really makes my day.
All right, Anne. So you wrap up the show. This is your podcast right now. To the writers that are reading, they're ready to read The Compassionate Writer for the first time. They have it in their hands like I am, and they're ready to open it. Your love letter to a reader. Let's close off with that.
Well, to writers and readers, I just want to say thank you so much for picking up the book, for your interest. May you always be kind to yourself. May you feel my encouragement kind of swarming around you, and feel motivated to write whatever it is you need to write, and to understand your life story in whatever way you want to do that. Be kind, be compassionate, and write your story. We need your story. And thank you so much for being on the show. It's great to have you here. Oh, thank you so much, Dave. Excellent. All information is always in the show notes. Go support our authors. Anne's got a ton of other books as well. So I know you as readers, you find an author you love, you're like, oh, I want more. There's a lot here for you. And as you listen to this, you're thinking of a writer friend in your community that also could benefit. Tell them about Anne and her book, The Compassionate Writer, and let them know as well. Buy an extra copy to send it to them. That way we'll get them in their hands even faster. Anne, again, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you. Hey, thank you so much again for pressing play. As you've heard, great guests on the show. And one thing you didn't hear in this conversation is what? What did you not hear? Think about it for a second. That's right. Not a single solitary commercial for a mattress or a supplement or a whatever you call it. No. Why? Because we don't want to break up the conversation with commercials. So the fact that you're still here means that you are a fan of the show, I'm assuming. So if you want to help,
to keep the podcast going and to make me feel really happy. All I really care about is coffee, okay? I just got to be honest. I love coffee. I'm drinking one right now. It's starting to get cold. I need to warm it up. Helping us with our Buy Me a Coffee link over at livingthenextchapter.com and also in the show notes helps kind of keep the lights on around here. Remember, I'm doing this for free. I'm paying for everything. So I would love to have a little coffee donation, even $5 kind of fills up my cup. And I would love to enjoy a coffee from you. So if you're interested, again, thank you for listening. But you can use our Buy Me a Coffee link and fill up the cup. Thanks for being here.